First at 9 this Saturday, the 15th of June 2024. Decision pending. Draft of the new SLC constitution handed over to the executive. Back on track. Sri Lanka expects to successfully exit bankruptcy following a meeting with the island nation's creditors next week, reveals President Wickremesinghe. Modest gains. World Bank projects Sri Lanka's economic growth to expand by 2.2% in 2024. Checking in. Indian External Affairs Minister to inquire into resumption of paused Indian-funded projects in Sri Lanka during one-day official visit to the island.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
This is Derana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to Derana First at 9. I'm Aditya Singh joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. Now taking you straight to your top story this evening. The draft constitution prepared by the Justice Chitrasiri Committee for Sri Lanka Cricket was presented to President Ranil Wickremesinghe at the Presidential Secretariat today. Derana has learned that the committee has recommended the election of an 18-member cricket board from a vote that lacks the involvement of sports associations. A committee to prepare a draft constitution was appointed based on the recommendations of the Cabinet Subcommittee that was appointed to address the challenges faced by Sri Lanka cricket and provide appropriate recommendations.
In the aftermath of Sri Lanka's early exit from the ICC Cricket World Cup last year, a Cabinet Subcommittee was appointed on the 6th of November to address the challenges faced by Sri Lanka cricket and provide appropriate recommendations. Chaired by Minister of Foreign Affairs President's Council Ali Sabri, the committee included Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Wijesekara, Minister of Labour and Foreign Employment Manusha Nanayakkara and Minister of Public Security Derana. Following extensive discussions with stakeholders involved in cricket, the subcommittee presented its report to the Cabinet on the 8th of January 2024. The President's office stated that recommendations covered several key areas, including the composition and structure of the Sri Lanka Cricket Board, administration, training, and the overall well-being of players at various levels, such as the national men's and women's teams and the under-19 and under-17 age groups. The PMD added that emphasis was placed on promoting good governance, transparency, professionalism, and accountability within Sri Lanka cricket. Additionally, proposals were made to reform the framework of Sri Lankan cricket across school, district, provincial and community levels, focusing on merit, equality and fairness. Based on the recommendations presented in the report by the Cabinet Subcommittee, the Cabinet convened on the 13th of February this year and appointed an expert committee to draft a new constitution for the Sri Lanka Cricket Board. This committee, chaired by retired Supreme Court Judge K.T. Chitrasiri, includes President's Counsel Harsha Amarasekara, Attorney at Law Dr. Aratha Wickramanayake and Chairman of the Sri Lanka Chamber of Commerce Duminda Hulangamuwa. Deputy Solicitor General Manohara Jayasinghe, representing the Attorney General's Department, and Assistant Draftsman Shamila Krishanti, representing the Legal Draftsman Department, nominated by Minister of Justice, were also included in the committee. This morning, the draft constitution on Sri Lanka cricket prepared by the Chitrasiri Committee was presented to President Ranil Wickremesinghe at the Presidential Secretariat. Accordingly, the Justice Chitrasiri Committee has recommended changing the constitution of Sri Lanka cricket and continuing its operations without interference, including political interference. The committee has also recommended the appointment of an 18-member cricket board, including its chairman from a vote that lacks the involvement of sports associations. 4 special members, which include the President of the Bar Association, the Chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, and the Chairman of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka, are empowered by the new constitution to appoint 9 out of the 18 members of the cricket board. However, 5 out of those 9 members have to be cricketers who have represented Sri Lanka in the international arena, while the remaining 4 members should include professionals of various sectors of the country. The cricket clubs meanwhile received the opportunity to appoint the remaining 9 members of the board under the provisions of the new SLC constitution.
Less sugar, same great taste. From Melbourne.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe revealed that the country expects to successfully exit bankruptcy following a meeting between Sri Lanka's creditors due to take place next week. Addressing a gathering, the head of state urged the public to not be complacent with the current progress, while claiming that the country should work closely with the IMF in the future as well, since the country's development depends on the successful implementation of the IMF program. Meanwhile, Minister of Education Dr. Susil Premajayantha said that the government is currently collaborating with Microsoft Sri Lanka to infuse artificial intelligence into the national education system.
A ceremony to mark the completion of the first phase of the newly constructed 3-story building at the Buddhist Girls National College in Kirimatiyana, Chilo was held yesterday. President Ranil Wickremesinghe, who graced the event, also toured the new classrooms and conversed with the students.
Digitalization goes beyond simply replacing a blackboard with a whiteboard. Our program transcends such mundane efforts. We intend to train 7,500 teachers in information technology and artificial intelligence. We have already put together the content for it. We have to train our teachers first. Pilot projects on artificial intelligence are currently underway in 20 schools. Those pilot projects have been initiated in collaboration with Microsoft Sri Lanka. We are now bringing education up to international standards. It is imperative that children receive good education encompassing the latest technology that surpasses traditional education. However, many requests are being made each day. Students will not wait until those projects are completed. I explained that to the people in charge of all our projects. They will somehow learn everything necessary to pass the O-levels and A-levels. But where will they learn discipline and culture? We will not have a place to impart that knowledge to our children. So we have to proceed with caution. We should not derail ourselves. If we derail ourselves, it will result in our misfortune.
When I took over, the country was bankrupt. According to the statement issued by the International Monetary Fund yesterday, we have successfully secured funding necessary for the next quarter. Additionally, the Committee of Countries that have official loan money to Sri Lanka will meet next week. We expect to hear a lot of good news at the meeting and finally exit bankruptcy. I am proud that we were able to turn our unfortunate situation around within 2 years. However, we cannot be complacent. If we are to proceed further, we need to discuss with the IMF and arrive at agreements. The IMF wants us to reduce unemployment 5% within the next 2 years. They also want us to increase our incomes. They have given us a program to follow. This country will develop only if we implement that program. We need to think differently. We have to create employment opportunities for everyone. The government's responsibility is to develop the country. The time of chanting slogans and debating pointlessly is over. This is not the time for traditional politics. It is our duty to create a good future for the next generation. We need to get there. We might have diverse political opinions, but we must leave all those divisions aside and work for the betterment of the country. That is my request to everyone.
Crunchy goodness for hunger on the go.
Now, the World Bank highlighted that the Sri Lankan economy is expected to expand by 2.2% in 2024. In its report titled Global Economic Prospects for the month of June, the World Bank stated that the said figure is a 0.5 percentage point upward revision from January, supported by modest recoveries in remittances and tourism.
In the World Bank's report titled Global Economic Prospects for June, the global lender stated that growth in the South Asian region is estimated to have increased to 6.6% in 2023, largely driven by faster growth in India. The report added that in early 2024, strong activity continued in India, while private sector activity picked up in several countries, including Pakistan and Sri Lanka, even though it remained weak. The World Bank stated that in Sri Lanka, activity has strengthened and tourism and remittances have also recovered, though they have remained below pre-pandemic levels. The World Bank noted that foreign exchange reserves have increased in several countries, including Pakistan and Sri Lanka, reflecting the easing of currency pressures and the receipt of official flows. Further, the global lender highlighted that Sri Lankan economy is expected to expand by 2.2% in 2024, a 0.5 percentage point upward revision from January, supported by modest recoveries in remittances and tourism. In 2025 to 2026, growth is projected to strengthen further, reaching 3% in 2026, assuming successful debt restructuring negotiations and the implementation of structural reforms, which would offset the adverse impact of the planned fiscal fiscal consolidation on growth. The World Bank also highlighted that the growth in the South Asia region is projected to slow from 6.6% in 2023 to 6.2% in 2024, mainly due to moderation of growth in India from a high base in recent years. It also added that with steady growth in India, regional growth is forecast to stay at 6.2% in 2025 to 2026.
India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar is slated to arrive in Sri Lanka for a one-day official visit on the 20th of June 2024 to oversee the resumption of development projects funded by India in Sri Lanka. The Indian External Affairs Minister's visit will precede Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Sri Lanka later in August this year.
During a meeting with President Ranil Wickremesinghe in India, Indian Minister of External Affairs Dr. S. Jaishankar assured that he would visit Sri Lanka soon to coordinate the Indian Prime Minister's visit, which is expected to take place in August this year. He went on to outline that he expects to visit Sri Lanka to oversee the progress of the resumption of projects funded by Indian investments which were halted midway. During the meeting, Dr. S. Jaishankar further went on to highlight plans for an industrial zone in Trincomalee to be established by the Indian government, which will attract numerous Indian investors and potentially investors from other countries as well. Meanwhile, during a media briefing yesterday, Minister of Foreign Affairs President's Counsel Ali Sabri revealed key details on the Indian External Affairs Minister's visit to Sri Lanka.
He is coming here to review the ongoing partnerships in various areas: renewable energy, tourism, partnership between the central banks, partnership between the finance ministries, and also to prepare for an upcoming visit of Prime Minister Modi. Prime Minister Modi is expected in Sri Lanka in due course. Once we finalize the dates, we will once again announce that. So that high-level visit will take place in Sri Lanka.
You said he will review the connectivity policy framework that was agreed last year. So will there be a review of the progress, and will there be a report, and will any projects be fast-tracked like the oil pipeline or maybe the ferry service which still has taken off?
I think they will review and find out where it is being held up and what action should be taken to expedite it. Some of these matters are there in our timeline during the last 20-30 years, so it's time to take real account of progress. I'm sure different ministries, line ministries, will sit and discuss that.
Now, meanwhile, Minister of Foreign Affairs President's Counsel Ali Sabri says that they are working on the debt restructuring deal with China and that both parties will resolve the matter without delay. During a media briefing, the minister went on to assert that the election will be held on time and that the people will get the chance to decide who should govern them for the next 5 years.
The Chinese side minister, now IMF was saying Sri Lanka has to sort out this comparability in terms of debt restructuring. What is the real issue with China?
I heard in the morning there was no issue with China at all. I mean, it's probably some birding and all those things. But we are working on that. And my information from our ambassador in China, Beijing, is that Chinese are very keen and will help us. That's precisely what I heard from Honorable State Minister of Finance, Honorable Singha. He also is in touch with his counterpart. So hopefully we should resolve it soon.
There are reports suggesting that the elections will be delayed and the president's terms be extended. So what can you elaborate on this?
You can't delay the elections. In terms of the constitution, elections cannot be called 2 months prior to the 17th of November. No one can hold post beyond the 16th of November. So therefore, election in terms of the constitution should be held between 17th of September and 16th of October, 1 month prior. So therefore, elections will be held and people will decide who should govern them for the next 5 years.
Now, in your latest political news, opposition leader Sajith Premadasa says that the current government imposes more and more taxes on the public because they are unable to meet revenue targets. Meanwhile, Minister of Urban Development and Housing Prasanna Ranatungi is of the view that Ranil Wickremesinghe is the ideal candidate for the presidency because he accepted the challenge of resurrecting the country's economy when others didn't. Now let's take a look at some thoughts expressed in the political arena. Rebuilding the country with the support of the IMF is realistic. It is the responsibility of the government to arrive at an agreement that benefits the public. The government imposes new taxes since they are unable to meet revenue targets. Rather than imposing more taxes, isn't it the government's responsibility to improve the efficiency of the tax collection process?
We invited Sajith Premadasa to take the responsibility of the country, and we assured him that we will help him, but he refused to accept the request. We also invited Anurukumar Disanayaka, and he too rejected the offer. Ranil Wickremesinghe was the only person who accepted the challenge. We are not from his party. We worked against him. However, we did not have any other solution. This is the only way forward. There is no other path for us to take.
Even though the appointment of Ranil Wickremesinghe goes against political ethics, it was constitutionally valid. However, everyone is eagerly anticipating the appointment of a government backed by the public mandate. It is clear that the National People's Power will claim victory in the upcoming presidential polls.
Even though there are people who follow the latest trend and take part in rallies, people with a real heart will remember who had to suffer in queues due to fuel and gas shortages. We just need to remind people of that during these 2 months, and the people will elect us into office.
People have been pushed to extremes by the arbitrary taxes imposed by the government. The Samaga Jana Balawega is the only party which can address the issues of how to reduce taxes, how to lower the cost of living, and how to create an environment for people to live peacefully.
People will decide whether or not to elect him into office. That is because people will think twice before handing over the country to a jester. Mahinda Rajapaksa will announce Sri Lanka Pujana Peremuna's presidential election candidate in the near future.
I would personally like it if Ranil Wickremesinghe becomes the presidential candidate. I like him not because of his experience, but because of how he accepted the challenge when the country was reeling during the height of the crisis. I think he is the most suitable candidate to hold office at the moment. The Sri Lanka Railway Station Masters Union announced their decision to temporarily call off their strike action until next Tuesday. President of the Railway Station Masters Union, Sumedha Somaratne, added that the decision came into effect following the positive responses received during a meeting held with the General Manager of Railways. Somaratne reported that while some demands were positively addressed, key issues such as promotions remain unresolved. He also highlighted a contradiction between a cabinet paper and a ministry letter which was identified during the discussions. Subsequently, a correction has been approved and it is expected to be addressed in a Public Service Commission meeting on Tuesday. Now let's take a look at some local news in brief.
Construction work of the last phase of the flyover being built across the Koval intersection resumed today. The public is advised to take alternate routes by the police as the construction activity is expected to last until the 15th of August. 2 suspects entered a pawning centre in Moratumula with the intention of robbing the establishment. However, a worker promptly alerted the police, causing the suspect to flee the pawning centre. 6 suspects in a multi-day fishing trawler with over 100 kilograms of narcotics in their possession were arrested by the Police Narcotics Bureau last night. According to the police, the trawler has subsequently been escorted to the Gold Harbour. Meanwhile, a body of an unidentified individual was found in Madathaveli Kites. Investigations were initiated after the Kites police were alerted regarding the corpse yesterday evening. The police mentioned that the deceased is aged between 45 to 50 years, approximately 5 feet and 2 inches in height. The remains were later transferred to the Jaffna Hospital while further investigations are being conducted by the Kites police.
Welcome back. Now responding to a query about whether the restructuring process of state-owned enterprises have been delayed, State Minister of Finance Shehan Semasinghe says that the process is continuing while adhering to judicial framework of the country. Addressing a media briefing recently, the State Finance Minister said that the Economic Transformation Bill will ensure policy consistency in the country, which will be favourable for both foreign and local investors.
Give me an update on the SOE restructuring because it's one of the key conditions, predictions the government has given the IMF. Yeah. And the government started somewhere early last year. What's the update? I mean, is it delayed more than expected?
Well, the progress is ongoing. I cannot say that there is a delay. If you see, the judicial compliance is very important when it comes to restructuring the SOEs. So we have to follow the judicial system which is laid down. We cannot go beyond that. So there is a framework that we are working on. We have published what is update on the progress. But I think earlier the better for the economy, because we are going into a new economy. The policy is very clear of the government. The government has stated the fact that in the future, it is the government will act as a regulator and a policy maker. So we want the private sector to ensure that they contribute to the fullest extent to manage the economy well for Sri Lanka. And if you see, the transformation law too gives confidence to the investors and the private sector to have their investments going in Sri Lanka.
Meanwhile, State Minister of Finance Shahan Singha also highlighted the need for policy consistency in Sri Lanka to attract more investment.
Let's be open. Our policy making was not consistent, neither it did not continue. So we are ensuring consistency and continuity in policy making, which will enhance an environment where the FDIs, at both FDIs as well as local investors and the private sector to have their investments going on in Sri Lanka and to have their operations freely in a more investor-friendly atmosphere, a private sector-friendly atmosphere. So this is what we want to create. But if there are different opinions that are required to be included in the economic transformation bill, there is room for discussion. As you know, this bill has been challenged in courts now. So we have to anyway wait for the determination of the Supreme Court until it is being delivered to the Speaker. But one thing we can assure, we will adhere the ruling or the recommendations of the Supreme Court.
State Minister of Finance Ranjit Siambalapitiya meanwhile claims that a special committee has been appointed to consider matters pertaining to the import of vehicles into the country. The State Minister highlights that restrictions placed on the import of vehicles will be relaxed according to an agreed upon hierarchy of priority, which will not be amended.
Yesterday, the Ministry of Finance appointed a special committee. All stakeholders affected by the import of vehicles were included in that committee. Our focus must first be on vehicles used for passenger transport. We must then look at vehicles used to transport cargo. Subsequently, we must look at vehicles which are used as alternatives for public transport. Motorcycles fall into that category. We can then consider the import of vehicles for private use. It is only after considering all those vehicles we can look into the import of luxury vehicles. This order of priority will not change. In future, we intend to pave the way for more electric vehicles to be imported.
And now let's take a look at some corporate news in brief.
Sanasa Life Insurance Company PLC announced that the company's board resolved to appoint P. Gajendra as the chairman of the company with effect from the 14th of June 2024. In its corporate disclosure, the company further said Gajendran, who is an independent non-executive director of the company, does not hold any shares of the company as at the date of his appointment. Cable Solutions Limited, meanwhile, announced that the Colombo Stock Exchange granted in principle approval for the listing of ordinary voting shares of the company by way of a combination of an offer for subscription and offer for sale on the Dirisavi board of the CSC. The company further proposed to issue 80,786,600 ordinary voting shares valued at 7 cents and 50 rupees per share. In other corporate news, Vatawala Plantations PLC announced the resignation of the company's acting chief executive officer. Accordingly, the company's acting CEO V. Govindasamy resigned from his post with effect from the 13th of June and will be serving as the chief operating officer of the company with effect from the 13th of June 2024.
Welcome back. Now, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has been elected for a second term, having won a majority of votes in the National Assembly. The new government of national unity combines Ramaphosa's African National Congress, the Centre-Right Democratic Alliance and smaller parties.
South Africa's parliament has re-elected Cyril Ramaphosa as the country's president following a landmark coalition deal between the governing African National Congress and opposition parties. Ramaphosa got 283 votes versus 44 for Julius Malema, the leader of the opposition Economic Freedom Fighters Party. The new government of national unity combines Ramaphosa's African National Congress, the centre-right Democratic Alliance and smaller parties. In his victory speech, Ramaphosa hailed the new coalition and stated that voters are expected the leaders to act and to work together for the betterment of the entire nation. The agreement was hashed out on a day of high political drama, which saw the National Assembly sitting late into the evening for votes to confirm who would hold the power in the new administration. The African National Congress Secretary General called the coalition deal a remarkable step. Meanwhile, the next step is for Ramaphosa to elect cabinet positions, which will include members of the Democratic Alliance.
That's all the news we have for you tonight. Thank you. Have a great night.